We are now going to have a fireside chat on the subject of the future of enterprise AI, developing trust in governments for sustainable business. And it's going to be between Giovanni Leoni, Head of Business Strategy and Development at Credo AI, and Peter Hallinan, the leader of Responsible AI at AWS. Gentlemen, the stage is yours. Please welcome them.
Hi, everyone. Wonderful to be here with you, Peter, at the World Summit AI in Montreal. My name is Giovanni Leoni. I'm head of business strategy and development at Credo AI, and we're going to have a short and hopefully as insightful conversation here today about AI governance, trust, and how it supports sustainable business processes. For me, it's been the last 2 days has been quite insightful in all talk about responsible AI, how we need AI governance now or 6 months ago, and how we in the best way can do that in an integrated way with both the world outside and business processes within. But for me, I've been into business processes and AI and responsible AI in the past 10 years within IKEA leading that work, but now with Credo AI. Peter, who are you?
I'm Peter Hallinan. I'm a senior manager at AWS AI, and I lead an organization that is dedicated to advancing the science and the practice of responsible AI. So we do science, we develop best practices, we work with the policy teams, with all the teams that are non-technical and need insight into these issues. And we work across the entire portfolio of services that use AI and ML.
Great, thanks. For some time, we've had the rhetorics being quite present on talking about ethics of AI. Quite present here today, and for the past 1 or 2 years, it's also been a lot about compliance regulation. But from your perspective, how do you see that AI governance support sustainable business processes to make better products, as Mark mentioned yesterday?
Yeah, so sustainability to me is all about doing something valuable for your customer now and in the long run. So it's about building good products. And it's very hard to think that products that are, unfair or non-robust or not private are in any way good. So responsible AI is kind of baked into everything. You have to consider the societal and technical issues around privacy and robustness and fairness. You also have to consider organizational issues of transparency and governance. But I think one thing that sometimes gets sort of left out of the equation is that responsible AI, while it's sort of emerging as a distinct toolkit of, best practices, tools, et cetera, is not just for scientists. It's also not the purview of ethicists, right? Everybody who's involved in building needs to be engaged in thinking about these issues, the same as they would be for any product. And one of the groups within companies that sometimes really doesn't get the support that they need are the product managers. Those are actually, your sort of responsible AI leaders in most situations.
Great, thanks to hear. And it's also to support having the confidence from the product managed leaders and from the C-suite to want to invest in AI, because they believe in it and see that they can do it with speed, with the right guardrails. How would you say that businesses can effectively evaluate and manage risks when buying and deploying AI technology? And how do you see that is different from traditional software?
Yeah, so I think, when you're rolling out AI nowadays, you're really rolling out statistics. This is not the same as traditional software, and it takes a while for all our mental habits and our institutional processes to kind of adapt to this. But, we have sort of a three-step approach that we follow. The first thing is that we start by defining very narrow use cases. So face recognition is not a use case. If you want to search for faces within a family photo album, it's very different from trying to find images of missing children in a gallery. The costs of making errors are different. The kinds of images that are being submitted are different. So you've got to get very, very specific about the use case. And the use case doesn't just include, the technical aspects. It includes, an understanding of the human workflow in which this is going to be embedded. But once you have a carefully defined use case, then you can assess risk very clearly. And then, based on the risk, you can choose an appropriate development process. Or deployment process. So, obviously music recommendation systems don't need the same set of processes as do, biometric systems that are gating entry into a building. But as I said before, different face recognition systems may require different processes, different testing. So that's the second part. It's basically risk-based development and deployment practices. But then the third key one is what's really different. I think the point is that our gut tells us that, if someone talks about an AI application or an AI model, we want to ask, is this a good model? Is this a good application? This is not the way to think about it. There is no such thing as the performance of an AI application or an AI model. There is only the performance of an application or a model on a specific data set. Okay? This is not like traditional software. Traditional software, you expect the manufacturer of the software to have unit test cases and integration tests and to really be responsible for the performance of the thing. And you get it out of the box and it works. No one is debugging or testing their databases, for example. But with AI, you have your data, you put it in, and particularly in the situation where your data is private, right? You're the only one who can tell if it's actually working, because the statistics of your data may be different from the statistics of the data that the system was trained on. So this is a different responsibility model. And as you think about assessing risk, as you think about governance, as you think about being responsible, you have to hold this in consideration as well.
Yeah, and I think that the complexity of understanding that it is very much contextual. It's contextual in where it's applied. It's contextual to where the model has been trained, on what data. It's contextual to in what territory and what regulatory compliance it will entail. Creates a necessity to take all those components into consideration before doing a relevant risk assessment and mitigate it in a relevant way. And all this can seem to be complex, seem hindrance. And one of the things that surfaces often, and what I've experienced over the years, is that the innovation team says that, wait now, do you create a hindrance to us to do our work, to kind of push the business and business models? And where do you see there where one could find a balance between innovation and AI governance to build trust, while at the same time see kind of how to not be a hindrance of new AI advances as within generative AI?
Yeah, so let's, if anyone here has built an AI system, you know that the builders are evolving the models quickly, they're evolving the data sets quickly. Actual applications often have multiple models and connective logic, and all of those are evolving quickly. And then those are embedded in workflows, as I said before, right? And you have to sort of accommodate them to the workflow. And then the workflow has humans in it, and humans, as you know, like to play and test things, and then they adapt their behavior. So you do have a pretty complicated system that's going on. And then if you toss into that, right, the fact that, yes, we have standards that are coming down the road, but, standards are not the same thing as regulations that are coming out of, laws, and different jurisdictions are coming up with different laws. Sometimes they conflict, sometimes they don't, but it is a very complicated environment. And I think that, when you think about governance, if you sit down with a development team, at the beginning and you show them this huge book of things they have to worry about, they go, oh my gosh, you're slowing me down. But really what you're doing is you've bottled up all the things that went poorly before that you discovered after the fact, and now you're sort of looking at the world through clear eyes up front about what you really need to grapple with. So I think instead of thinking about this as a balance, I would think about this as, hey, the governance really helps. These are complicated issues, but they're doable and they're manageable. It's work.
So being proactive, setting those guardrails and foundation is actually preempting where something would fail or be decommissioned or not at all being able to go to market or being able to be used.
Exactly.
And from an AWS AI perspective, how do you prioritize transparency and governance in the approach to AI? And what do you see that the steps organizations can take in terms to address transparency and governance?
Well, let me take each of those separately. So both of them are very high priorities for us. On the transparency side, I think in AI, there are kind of three typical kinds of documentation. There's data sheets. There are model cards, which are both of which are technical descriptions of data sets and models, respectively. And then you have system-level descriptions. We at Last reInvent released our first 3 AI service cards. And we also released a model card capability in SageMaker. So we're big believers in this kind of transparency and giving people access to the information that they need to make informed choices about the use of these models and services. On the governance side, we have tools that help people monitor model deployment, drift, that kind of thing. Probably many more tools coming, but even better, there's an entire ecosystem of tool companies that are getting into this space to help. And then there's standards coming as well. So, in terms of what companies would do, I would encourage them to use data sheets, to use model cards, to use system cards, whatever their version of. Copy ours, if you like, and use that as a template. Look around to find the tools that will help you. And pay close attention to the standards. I think they can help. We're really excited to see that ISO 42001 is going to get finalized, fingers crossed, later this year. That's going to be a key standard, sort of umbrella standard into which other standards will fit for the EU AI Act. And I think that's actually going to help things. It's going to help with the governance. Because, at the end of the day, right, you don't just worry about what you're building. You have an entire ML supply chain that you need to worry about. And so that's where standards really help.
Happy to hear. And seeing that we're running out of time for us to talk and to let in a few questions from the audience. But to be able to end up, what would you see what are the positive things you see looking forward in terms of AI governance becoming more the norm? And where would you see that one can see upon these requirements as opportunities rather than challenges?
Yeah, I think responsible AI sometimes gets characterized as defensive plays, ways to avoid errors. That's not right. Responsible AI is how you build, like we were saying before, good products, sustainable business. It's a positive. You do this right, you're helping people. You're helping as many people as you can with your products. So I think that is people are becoming more and more aware of that, and as the standards and tools become more readily available, as we get more experience building and testing these things, that it will become normal course for product managers, for all builders, to think about these issues and act to, to do well along these responsible AI dimensions just in the normal course of business. That's what we're shooting for.
Thanks a lot, Peter. And I think that is something that resonates with what I've seen going on for the last couple of years, is that we're actually catching up on having good enough digital maturity, having good enough data governance, AI governance, to be able to fully take advantage of the great benefits that advanced technology as AI in different shapes and form gives us, while at the same time mitigate the harms and really take the opportunities of have a full positive impact of AI. So we have a few questions that we can take. So let's see if we have some hands in the audience. We have one hand here on the right.
Hello, testing. Okay. Here's a quick question. Yesterday, we heard some executives mention that in this world we hear in the world of AI concepts like biases, right? That we want to avoid biases in the AI systems and we want them to be ethical. And he, in different words, proposed that this is not about black or white. We want systems that are more ethical than things that we have today, and are less biased than not some of the ones that we have today. And in management, it said that you can't manage what you can't measure. So what is what would be a pragmatic approach in the complex systems that you mentioned as part of this talk, where you could measure, right, whatever dimension is proper to make sure that these systems are fair and are behaving the way we want them to be throughout their multiple components, right? Is there such thing as an approach to observability, which we've had in IT for a long time, towards these areas of ethical systems and non-biased and some measurements that could be used towards that?
So one key component of mitigating or reducing unwanted demographic bias in systems is to have test sets which are appropriately representative. These test sets are harder to build than training data sets often. They have to have you can tolerate much lower levels of noise. You obviously have to be representative. You have to get informed consent, and it takes time and money to construct these things. But you can do it, and you should do it. NIST is a big proponent of this approach, for one.
Great. And then we have a question over here on the left.
Yeah, just on this theme of ethics and social, what ethical or social issues do you see that could hinder the rollout of AI technologies?
You want to answer that, or? It's a great question. Some of these technologies are getting more airtime than others. If you look at what I guess nowadays would be called classical AI, last year it would have been cutting-edge AI as opposed to generative AI, right? You still end up with kind of the same kinds of problems, like people thinking, like people play with systems, right? They go outside the bounds of the use cases for which it was either explicitly or implicitly designed, and they run into trouble. So I think, the testing paradigm that I described before is kind of, it costs time and it costs effort. You have to build the data sets. When you change things, you have to test. It takes discipline. And I think that the core answer to your question is what hinders this is when we don't apply the discipline that we're capable of applying. Anyway, maybe you have a different take.
No, I agree. Just to add on that is that at my prior employment with IKEA of leading algorithm and AI ethics, we were deeply into the social and ethical aspects of seeing how can one keep being a responsible company also in a digital realm, and being very clear about the ambitions ones have, and also to in a systematic way, then see to that one have those requirements when also applying it to AI and being transparent on how one approaches that consciously. It is not perfect, but it's about being very explicit about how to translate those ambitions and vision one has from a social and ethical point of view into making it tangible and programmatic. And by doing so, one can then explicitly manage algorithms as good as possible, being transparent about it and being clear of kind of what ethical ambitions and social ambitions one have. Of course, each organization will have its take on it, but at least being transparent about it, one can be clear about where one coming from and what one do tangibly to manage AI responsibly and ethically. And there we are out of time, but if you have more questions and thoughts, just catch us afterwards.
All right. I think if we have to.
Thank you both. That was a great discussion and some great questions there from our audience as well. Now it's time for lunch, so do go and grab some.